Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be giving you my review of Adam Audio's T7V. At the beginning of the video we're going to talk about the specifications, then we're going to take a look at the speaker and the build quality, then we'll be talking about how they sound, first in a general sense and then the mid, high and low broken down. And then finally we're going to be comparing them to the Yamaha HS7, which is a speaker that I've been using up until now and I have a lot of experience with. And they're in the same price point as the T7V, so they give you a pretty good idea of what you're going to get if you spend money on either of those speakers. So let's get into it. So there's two models in Adam Audio's T series. There's the T7V, which features a 7-inch woofer, and the smaller model, which is T5V, which has a 5-inch speaker cone. So if you have a large or medium-sized room, the T7V would probably be better suited for you. If you had a small room, the T5V would probably be plenty. So the T7V plays down to 39 Hertz and plays all the way up to 25,000 kilohertz. And it features Adam Audio's own technology, their UART tweeter design. And you'll see that when I pick the speaker up. So they are just two-way speakers. They're roughly $800 in Australia. They're or $400 for one. And on Amazon, I saw them for about $250 US. And in the United Kingdom, I saw them for about £165. So those prices, the last two prices I gave you, are for a single speaker. So let's have an actual look at the box and see what they look like. So here I am with the speaker on my shoulder, and you can see their beautiful tweeter there, and the nice lines that they've got cut into the front of that box, and the big 7-inch woofer, and their logo just down the bottom. So it's a pretty plain design. I really like the shape of the tweeter and the dispersion cone that it uses. It looks really cool, especially compared to the Yamaha HS7s. These have a sort of vibe of like better design technology or sort of more advanced thinking. So that's pretty cool. And we'll flip them around and have a look at the back and see what's on the back. So you can see that these are a rear ported design. So ideally you'd want to have them pretty far away from the wall. If you can't achieve that, they have these handy low pass filters and high pass filters. So the low pass could be handy if they're close to the wall. Maybe you need to cut or boost the low end. So you can cut by 2 decibels or boost by 2 on both the high frequencies and the low frequencies. There's a little light here that indicates whether the power's on. Could be ideal if that was on the front, but it's not the end of the world, I suppose. This is the volume knob here, and it doesn't have an indentation on it, so you can't set it accurately, so you kind of have to eyeball it, and getting your speakers balanced at the same volume can be a little difficult. We've got the XLR balanced line in, and then the unbalanced RCA, and then you've got an input switch to pick between them, and then you've got the power switch and the regular kettle cable plug there. So the speakers are a pretty good construction. They are quite heavy. Having them up on my shoulder is a little bit difficult for a prolonged period of time. But what we can do now is we can start talking about how they sound. Also a note, I'm reviewing these speakers from a perspective of a music producer. But I also have listened to a lot of metal on these speakers just as a general listener, as well as music, just generally listening. So my feedback is specifically for music producers, but you, if you're just an audiophile, or if you just want a good set of speakers, this is going to be relevant to you, because I really think that accurate studio monitors are great listening speakers for anybody. So when I first sat down with the speakers and listened to them, there were some initial thoughts that I wrote down. So I'm going to share those with you, and they haven't changed. So anything that I mention hasn't changed from when I first listened to them to now a week later. So I forgot to mention that I did have these for a week, so I have been listening to them for a little while now. The first things I noticed when I sat down and listened to the T7V was the stereo field that it sets up. the separation between the instruments, and my ability to pick whereabouts those instruments were placed in the stereo field. I noticed that the high frequencies were not harsh. They were open and very airy, and that the detail of the speakers was definitely an upgrade to what I was used to hearing. So if I then speak through from the high frequencies to the mid-range to the low end, I'll give you an idea of what I think they sound like top to bottom. So I touched on it briefly, but the tweeter, the high frequencies, was so open and non-aggressive on my ears, non-fatiguing. And I could really notice the detail in the recordings that I was listening to for cymbal hits and hi-hats, percussion, all of that sort of stuff that sits up in that high registry. I really noticed the detail, and it was so satisfying to listen to them and not feel like my ears were being attacked. They're such laid-back speakers where somehow they managed to give you the high frequencies but without it being harsh. And I find that really fascinating and really great. So detailed, open, and very easy to listen to. And the detailing of reverbs and delay tails and this sort of thing are certainly more obvious and easier to listen for. Usually I use headphones to listen for reverb tails. I found it easier to listen to the reverbs on these speakers. So the mid-range was definitely the part of these speakers I think I enjoyed the most. I would say that the mid and the highs certainly more exciting to me than what I have experienced on other speakers of the same price. So the mid-range was, first of all, quite far forward. Now, I don't think that it's too far forward, but it's certainly more in my face than what I was used to, and I really liked it because the speakers had a bite to them where the aggressive lead sounds and guitars were certainly more audible. I could listen to the detail in the instruments, and I could hear separation between multiple instruments. So when I'm listening to psytrance, a lot of the time there's a lot of things that are sort of speaking over top of one another. And the separation between the instruments and the mid-range was definitely helping me identify and hear things in mixes of tracks that I hadn't heard on the other speakers that I generally listen to. I also noticed that with the high and the mid-range, there was a bit more depth into the music as well. Not a huge amount more depth, but a bit more depth. So the mid-range, quite far forward, very bitey and very detailed in hearing. You could really hear like difference in distorted guitars and this sort of thing. So I really think that if you're mixing for metal or if you just want to listen to metal, these speakers are pretty good for that, for sure. Electronic music as well, but I definitely noticed the guitars, and I definitely noticed in like a lot of FM styled leads in psytrance that these speakers really represented them very well. And then finally, the bass driver. So the bass driver is probably where I was feeling that the speaker was a little bit weak, and maybe that's because I'm used to a very different sound. So I think that when I hear this, it's incorrect. I could be completely off point there, but to my taste, and that's all I can go off, when I first listened to them, I really didn't feel like I was getting a good punch of low end. I listened to extremely punchy music. I listened to a lot of psytrance, and I really felt like the kick and the bass, they were there, but they sort of felt like they were a little bit receded behind everything else, and in a way, a little bit flabby. Now, there's definitely a lot of low end that comes out of these speakers. Enough low end, not too much. And I cannot vouch for how detailed I think it is, because in my listening environment and compared to the HS7s, I don't think I've really experienced an environment where I've had very textured and detailed sub. So I will not be able to tell you that the detail on the low end is where it needs to be, because I can't give you that information. But I can tell you that they do feel like they sort of just lack a little bit of punch. That was my impression on the first day. Today, again, after having a solid listening session before I recorded this video, I felt like there was a bit more there. So I don't know whether the speakers maybe just take a little bit of time to wear in, or whether my ears have adjusted to how they sound, or what. But I was definitely more satisfied today listening to them than previously. So to compare the sound to the HS7, the HS7 is a speaker that so many producers have, and for good reason. For the price and for the competition, they were the best up until I think these have come onto the scene. So I would say that the bass woofer on the Yamahas, to me, has a sound that's more appealing. It has a definite punch. It doesn't play as low. And there's definitely not as much low end. I'll show you a graph where you can see. But the tweeter on the HS7 is left for dead by the Adams. The mid-range and the tweeter on the Adams is a different world. It's not fatiguing. And like I said, the stereo image is superior, and the detail within the instrument separation and the instruments themselves is certainly superior with the Adams. So if you could have the bass driver from the Yamahas and the light on the front and the indented knob combined with the tweeter and mid-range on the Adams, you would have the perfect speaker. That's not saying much. I think that the Adam Audio speaker is at an advantage. So here you can see the graph that I took of the sound that the speakers produced in this room. Okay, so I used SonarWorks with a reference microphone. The speakers were in the exact same position when the frequency response was measured for the room. And this gives you a little bit of an insight into how they perform in the exact same environment, even though your environment won't be the same as this. I think it's an interesting comparison. So you can see that obviously the room has problems. So the room has problems around 80 to 90 hertz. There's a room mode where there's not much low-end frequencies coming through there. And then you can also see that on the Yamahas, they have a dip around 1,000 hertz. So they're struggling to produce those frequencies, whereas the Adams are filling that out pretty well. So that's not necessarily a room problem per se, but it's more of the Yamahas are probably pretty weak in that range. So you can see that the Adams certainly are producing more low end from say 200 hertz down. They're definitely producing more. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because I've got quite a big peak in the upper sub, and then that's typically due to the room. And the reason I use the SonarWorks software when I'm producing is because it does actually EQ that and try and flatten out the room a bit more. And when I do turn that on and I'm producing, it gives me a far better sound. So I've got a video on SonarWorks that you can check out. I'll put a card up so that it pops up on the screen. And yeah, have a look at this, and it gives you a bit of an idea of, yeah, speakers are in the exact same position as they were. Obviously, I take them out and put the other one in. They're in the same spot. When I measure the room, and the measurement is as accurate as any other software. So this gives you a fair idea of how they'll sound, how the frequency response is in my room, and how they differ from one another. Some other things that I noticed that I'll just mention finally is that the sweet spot on the Adam Audio speaker seems much wider than the HS7, but There is one downside to them that I've experienced. I'm not sure whether other people have experienced it. I haven't heard anything about it yet, but these speakers hiss. Even at low volume, with no gain on the sound card, they hiss. I'm using the balance connector. I'm using the same connection that I hook up to the HS7s. And I noticed that as soon as I sat down with them, there's a hiss always coming out of them. That may not be a deal breaker for you, but it's probably something you need to know about. Correct me in the comments below if you don't experience the hiss. They are slightly more expensive than the HS7, but I believe that the money would be well spent, whether you're producing electronic music or instrumental bands, mixing, that sort of thing. I really think that the Adam speaker would be a superior choice for you in your studio. I'll just let you know as well that in the coming week, or 2 weeks, I have a review of these. They're the AKG 712 Pro studio referencing headphones, and I'm going to be letting you know what I think of these as well. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that helps you make a good decision for what speakers would be good in your studio. And I'm going to be trying my best to reach out to more manufacturers and see whether they'll give me the chance to review their products. So give me a thumbs up if you liked it, leave me a comment, and let me know what you would like me to review next. So thank you very much, guys, and I'll see you in another video.